भट्टारं वररुचिं भाष्यकारं पतञ्जलिं पाणिनिं सूत्रकारं च प्रणतोऽस्मि मुनित्रयं नत्वा सरस्वतीं देवीं शुद्धां गुण्यां करोम्यहं पाणिनीयप्रवेशाय लघुसिद्धान्तकौमुदीम्। आदौ अष्टाध्यायी पारायणं कुर्मः। 41 सूत्रादारभ्य ये पठितुमिच्छन्ति अथवा वक्तुमिच्छन्ति चित्रानारायणन्।
नमस्ते भगिनी। पठामि वा?
पठतु।
अनुवदामि?
न पठतु।
अस्तु भगिनी, धन्यवादः। लोपस्त आत्मनेपदेषु ध्वमो ध्वात् यजद्वैनमिति च तस्य तात तप्त नप्त नतनाश्च इदन्तोमसि त्वो यक् इष्ट्वीनमिति च स्त्रात्व्यादयश्च आज्यसेरयुक् आज्यसेरसुक् अश्वक्षीर वृषलवणानाम् आत्मप्रीतौ क्यचि अमि सर्वनाम्नः आमि सर्वनाम्नः सुट् त्रैस्त्रयः ह्रस्वनद्यापो नुट् षट्चतुर्भ्यश्च श्रीग्रामण्योश्छन्दसि गोपादान्ते इदितो नुं धातोः शे मुचादीनां मस्जिनशोर्झलि रधिजभोरचि।
सम्यक्, धन्यवादः।
धन्यवादः भगिनी।
महालक्ष्मी भगिनी।
नमस्ते भगिनी। लोपस्तात्मनेपदेषु द्वमोद्वात् यजद्वैनमिति च तस्य तात तप्तनप्तनतनाश्च इदन्तो
तनथनाश्च
तनतनाश्च इदन्तोमसि त्वो यक् इष्ट्वीनमिति च स्नात्व्यादयश्च आज्यसेरसुक् अश्वक्षीरवृषलवणानाम् आत्मप्रीतौ क्यचि आमि सर्वनाम्नः सुट् त्रैस्त्रयः ह्रस्वनद्यापो नुट् षट्चतुर्भ्यश्च श्रीग्रामण्योश्छन्दसि गोपादान्ते इदितो नुं धातोः शे मुचादीनां मस्जिनशोर्झलि रधि जभोरचि।
सम्यक्, धन्यवादः। शेषाद्रि सारनाथन्।
मैथिली भगिनी, श्रूयते वा?
श्रूयते। भवत्याः नाम तु तथा दीयते अत्र।
ओहो, मम पत्युः ईमेल् ऐडी अस्ति।
अस्तु अस्तु, चिन्ता नास्ति।
लोपस्त आत्मनेपदेषु द्वमोद्वात् यजद्वैनमिति च तस्य तात तप्तनप्तनतनाश्च इदन्तोमसि तोयक् इष्ट्वीनमिति च स्नात्व्यादयश्च आजसेरसुक् अश्वक्षीरवृषलवणानाम् आत्मप्रीतौ क्वचि आमि सर्वनाम्नः सुट् त्रैस्त्रयः ह्रस्वनद्यापो नुट् षट्चतुर्भ्यश्च श्रीग्रामण्यो छन्दसि गोपादान्ते इदितो नुं धातोः शेमुचादीनां मस्जिनशोर्झलि रधिजभोरचि। धन्यवादः भगिनी।
गोः पादान्ते तत्र उपध्मानीयः भवेत्।
गो वोः पादान्ते
सम्यक् अस्तु अग्रे गच्छामः लघुकौमुदी बिन्दु
नमस्ते औङ आपः आबन्धादङ्गात् परस्य औङः शी स्यात् औङित्यौकार विभक्तेः संज्ञा रमे रमाः सम्बुद्धौ च आप एकारः स्यात् सम्बुद्धौ एं ह्रस्वादिति सम्बुद्धिलोपः हे रमे हे रमाः रमां रमे रमाः आङि चापः आङि ओसि चाप एकारः रमया रमाभ्यां रमाभिः याडापः आपोङितो याट् वृद्धिः रमायै रमाभ्यां रमाभ्यः रमायाः रमयोः रमाणां रमायां रमासु एवं दुर्गाम्बिकादयः
सम्यक् धन्यवादः
धन्यवादः
रमाशंकर
नमस्ते भगिनी श्रूयते वा सर्वनाम्नः स्याड्ह्रस्वश्च आबन्तात् सर्वनाम्नो ङितः स्यात् स्यादापश्च ह्रस्वः सर्वस्यै सर्वस्याः सर्वासां सर्वस्यां शेषं रमावत् एवं विश्वादय आबन्ताः विभाषादिक्समासे बहुव्रीहौ सर्वनामता वा उत्तरपूर्वस्यै उत्तरपूर्वायै पीयस्येति वा सर्वनामसंज्ञा
इतोपि एका पङ्क्तिः अस्ति द्वितीयस्यै
अद्वितीयस्यै द्वितीयायै एवं तृतीया धन्यवादः
अग्रेपि पठतु
अम्बार्थेति ह्रस्वः हे अम्ब हे अक्क हे अल्ल जरा जरसौ इत्यादि पक्षे रमावत् गोपाः विश्वपावत्
अस्मिन् सप्ताहे अधीतानां विषयाणां सारांशं संक्षेपेण पश्यामः. Right. So the last week we covered Strilinga Shabdas, started with Strilinga Shabdas. Tatra Akaranta Strilinga Shabdanam Rupani Katham Siddhyanti iti Drishtavantah. Adau Pratamaha Pataha Parichayatmakaha Asi Yatra Strilinga Shabdaha Kidrishaha Bhavanti iti Kinchidiva Drishtam. Atra etesham sarvesham api vivaranam agre tattat prakarane asmabhihi labhyate eva. यथा स्त्री प्रत्यय प्रकरणम् अस्ति तत्र केभ्यः शब्देभ्यः के स्त्री प्रत्ययाः भवन्ति इति जानीमः. एवं कृदन्त प्रकरणे एते के प्रत्ययाः केभ्यः धातुभ्यः भवन्ति इत्यादि पश्यामः. किन्तु स्थूलरूपेण एतेषां ज्ञानम् अस्ति चेत् रूपसिद्धौ तत्र सौकर्यं भवति इति दृष्ट्या त्रिविधाः शब्दाः भवन्ति. स्त्री प्रत्ययान्ताः शब्दाः तत्र स्त्रियाम् इत्यधिकारे प्रत्ययाः विधीयन्ते. चतुर्थाध्याये टाप् डाप् चाप् इति त्रयः प्रत्ययाः येषां योजनेन आकारान्त स्त्रीलिङ्गाः भवन्ति. ते सर्वे आबन्ताः इति उच्यन्ते. So knowing this term abanta or recognizing a word as abanta is important because a lot of prakriya depends on that factor being up. Similarly, neep, nish, neen iti trayah stri pratyayah tesham yojanena ikaranta strilinga shabdaha nishpadyante te sarvepi nyantaha iti uchyante. So even if you are not able to recognize which is neep, which is nish, which is neen, as long as you know that it is a nyanta, that is enough for prakriya. एवं षट् प्रत्ययाः तैः सह ऊङ् इति प्रत्ययः अस्ति. ऊकारान्तस्त्रीलिङ्गशब्दाः तत्र भवन्ति। एवं ति इति प्रत्ययः तु युवतिः इति एकस्मिन्नेव शब्दे श्रूयते। एते सर्वेपि स्त्रीप्रत्ययाः। कृदन्तेषु कश्चन अधिकारः अस्ति, स्त्री अधिकारः इत्युच्यते। स्त्रियां क्तिन् इत्यधिकारे ये ये प्रत्ययाः योज्यन्ते तदन्ताः शब्दाः अपि स्त्रीलिङ्गशब्दाः एव भवन्ति। तत्र पुनः द्वैविध्यं दृश्यते। केचन प्रत्ययाः इकारान्ताः, इकारान्तशब्दान् व्युत्पादयन्ति, यथा क्तिन्, इ, अनि इति। तत्र प्राधान्येन दृष्टः क्तिन् प्रत्ययः। मतिः, गतिः, प्रीतिः, युक्तिः इत्यादि बहवः यत्र यत्र ति इति अन्ते श्रूयते तत्र प्रायेण क्तिन् प्रत्ययः भवति, इकारान्त स्त्रीलिङ्गशब्दः भवति। तत्रैव अकारान्त प्रत्ययाः अपि बहवः सन्ति। यत्र ह्रस्व अकारान्तः शब्दः भवति तत्र तेन सह टाप् प्रत्ययः अपि भवति। So it won't stop with just the akaranta pratyaya. We get an akaranta pratipadika. Then immediately the moment something is adanta and strilinga, tap joins it. Right? So we those also end up in the first bucket. Right? They started up with a pratyaya in the kridanta, that is the striyam ktin adhikara. But once they get the tap, they are also abantas, and for subanta prakriya, these two are the same, right? So you will have the same kind of prakriya. Anye api bahavaha shabdaah santi yatra rudhya strilinge tesham prayogaha bhavati. तत्र किमर्थम् इत्यस्य प्रश्नः न भवति, प्रश्नस्य उत्तरं न भवति। यथा नौः इत्यस्ति अथवा नौका। नौः इत्युक्ते बोट्। किमर्थम् इति चेत् तत्र प्रयोगः स्त्रीलिङ्गे अस्ति। एवमेव बहवः शब्दाः विशेष्यनिघ्नाः। विशेष्यनिघ्नाः इत्युक्ते एकस्यैव शब्दस्य त्रिषु लिङ्गेषु अपि प्रयोगः भवति विशेष्यम् आश्रित्य। सर्वे संख्यावाचकाः विशेषणरूपाः भवन्ति, अतः लिङ्गत्रयेपि प्रयोगः भवति। एवं धातुभ्यः यदा शब्दस्य निष्पत्तिः भवति तदापि तत्र धातोः आकारः, ईकारः, ऊकारः अन्ते श्रूयेत। तदा धातु प्रयुक्तं कार्यं यदस्ति तद् भवति। उणादिप्रत्ययान्ताः अपि शब्दाः बहवः भवन्ति स्त्रीलिङ्गेषु। So this is purely to give an overview of the different kinds of shabdas which are available. Right? So we have Stri Pratyayanta Shabdas, mainly Abantas and Nyantas, which have their own effect on the Subanta Prakriya. If it is an Abanta, you have a set of 7 sutras which operate. Nyanta, there is basically one sutra, the Halnyabhyo Dirghat Sutisya Praktam Hal. So to apply those sutras, we need to identify whether it is Abanta or Nyanta. Right? That is the only specific identification you need for Prakriya. Right? Whether it is Abanta, whether it is Nyanta, or whether it is belonging to the Dhatu. Right? These are the 3 things which have an effect on Prakriya. So if the Akara belongs to a Dhatu, then we know Ato Dhatoho can apply. If the E or U belongs to a Dhatu, then we can have Achishnu Dhatu Bhruvam, O Supi, etc. For Abantas, we can have a set of Karyas. For Nyantas, we have a Karya. Other than this, we have a Nadi Samya. Right? So Nadi Samya, we have not yet looked at it in full. There are 4 sutras which define Nadi Samya. Knowing the Nadi Samya, whether the Shabda qualifies for Nadi Samya or not, is another important factor. Right? So that is all we need to keep in mind. The rest, what is the specific Krit Pratyaya which is behind, etc., are not required for this. Right? So all this is a general knowledge kind of a thing. Okay. So there is a question which says audio has been very low since yesterday's class. I don't think there is anything that can be done from our end. Is it low for everybody?
It's fine, but
Okay, Bhagini, no problem.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, so
clear,
maybe,
Bhagini.
okay. So it should be, I mean, maybe you can try, check the volume at your end, Bhagini. Okay. So now we will move on to the next one, which is the abanta shabdas, right? So whenever a shabda is abanta, most of the akaranta strilinga shabdas are abantas, right? 98% maybe. So we have these karyas which come into play. There are 7 sutras. So halnyabhyo dirghat sudisya praktam hal removes the supratyaya. Aunga apaha replaces the au pratyaya with she. So Rama e becomes Rame. Angi chapaha and sambuddhaucha give ekaradesha to the anga when followed by 3 pratyayas. Ta, os and sambuddhi. Right? So in sambuddhi we get he rame s. So the supratyaya is deleted by eng hasvat sambuddhe to give he rame. So rame a becomes ramaya, rame os becomes ramayos. Right? So 2 sutras in 3 pratyayas we get ekaradesha for the anga. Yad apaha. So if the anga is abanta, the nit pratyaya gets an agama, which is the yat agama. Yat has takara as it. So ya is the actual addition, which is added to the beginning of the pratyaya. So ya a becomes yai by vriddhi. Ya as becomes yas. Ya and am becomes yam. Hrasvanadhyaponut we have already seen multiple times. So if it is abanta, then you get a nudagama for am. And lastly, ngeram nadhyam nibhyaha replaces the ni pratyaya with am. So you can see all these specifically call out for ap, abhyaha, apaha, apaha, etc. Right? So they are all specific to abantas. So any akaranta strilinga shabda which is an abanta will get these karyas. Then we saw that there are sarvanama shabdas which are also abantas. Right? So words in the sarvadigana, when they are used in strilinga, they get tap pratyaya. So they become abantas, akaranta strilinga shabdas. They get the general karyas. In addition, there are 2 specific things for sarvanama in strilinga. One is sarvanamnaha syat hrasvascha. Instead of yat, we get syat. And the anga becomes a hrasva. So sarva a becomes sarva, sya a syai, sarvasyai, sarvasyaha, sarvasyam. Then ami sarvanamna sutta. This was also in pullinga, similarly in strilinga. Instead of nakara, we get sakara as the agama, sarvasam, vishwasam, etc. So these are the 2 specific karyas for sarvanamas in strilinga. In the samgya itself, there are 3 factors. Those which are in the sarvadigana, all adanta shabdas in the sarvadigana will become akarantas with the exception of ubhaya. Ubhaya doesn't become ubhaya, it becomes ubhayi because of a special sutra, stri pratyaya. Other than that, all adanta sarvanamas become abantas in strilinga. There is a specific sutra, vibhasha diksamase bahuvrihau. The words which indicate directions, purva, dakshina and uttara, when they are a part of bahuvrihi samasa, that is the dik samasa, indicating the mid directions, right? Northeast, northwest, etc. So there they get an optional sarvanama samya. because of which the karyas will also be optional. We get two forms. Uttarapurvasyai, Uttarapurvayai, Uttarapurvasyaha, Uttarapurvayaha, Uttarapurvanam, Uttarapurvasam, Uttarapurvasyam, Uttarapurvayam, etc. Tiyasya Itsuva was also a Vartika which we saw in Pullinga. The words Dvitiya and Tritiya get an optional Sarvanama Samya only in Nit Pratyayas. Nye, Ngasi, Ngas and Ni. So we get two forms there. Lastly, we also saw a few Vishesha Shabdas under Akarantas. So there are three words, Amba, Akka, Allah, all of which mean mother. So in Sambuddhi, instead of Sambuddhaucha Ekaradesha, they get a Hrasva. Akara becomes Akara. Right? So you get Amba, He Akka, He Allah. Everything else is similar to Rama, no other change. So this also applies to samasas. Right? Somebody has say Jagadamba. There you will have Jagadamba. Right? So Madamba becomes Madamba. So there's a very famous shloka. Ayi Jagadamba Madamba Vanapriya Vasini, etc. So you can see that. So whatever samasa ending with Amba will also get Harasva in Sambuddhi. Ambe is wrong. Right? In Samskrita, Ambe is not a Sadhu Shabda. It has to be Amba in Sambodhana. Rest is completely similar to Rama. We also saw the Jara Shabda, which has one set of forms completely similar to Rama. In addition, if it is an Ajadi Pratyaya, we have Jaraya Jarasanyatarasya. So Jaras, Jara Ityasya, Jaras Sarvadesha. So once you have Jaras, it is just joining the Prakriti Pratyaya. There is no further Karya which happens. Right? So Jarase and Jarasaha, Jarasa, etc. Everywhere you just hear the Sakara. Then we saw the only non-Abanta Shabda, which is the Gopa Shabda, and other words similar to it, where the Akara is from a Dhatu, not from the tapped up or chop. So none of the Karyas for Rama apply to it. Only thing which applies is Ato Dhatoho, which deletes the Akara in Bhasamya. Hope we all remember Bha. Right? Yachi Bham. So Asarvanamasthana Yakaradi or Ajadi Pratyaya makes the Anga to be called Bha. And if then there is Bhasamya, Akara is deleted. So Gopa as becomes Gopas, Gopaha. Gopa, Gopabhyam, Gopabhihi, Gope, Gopabhyam, Gopabhyaha, etc. Right? So now if you have any questions regarding these. Rama Jas uses Akasavarane Dirghaha, whereas Rama plus Shas uses Prathamayo Purva Savaranaha. In Jas we have Dirgha Jasicha, which is a Nishedha. It is a general Nishedha. See, this difference doesn't make much effect in Akarantas, because whether we do Prathamayo Purva Savaranaha or do a normal Sandhi like Savarna Dirgha, we still end up with A. So we don't see a difference. But in other cases, like say Ikaranta, Gauri Shabda, in Jas, Purva Savarna Dirgha does not apply because of Dirgha Jasicha. There we will do Yanadesha. So the form will be Gauriyaha. Whereas if we do Purva Savarna Dirgha, it will be Gaurihi. Right? So that difference is very clear in non-Akarantas. But in Akarantas, we still have Dirgha Jasicha. So we cannot apply Prathamayo Purva Savarnaha in Jas. So it reverts to the Savarna Dirgha. Whereas in Shas, we apply Prathamayo Purva Savarna. Can we coin words like Dakshina Para to indicate southwest? Apara Shabda is not directly used as a digvachaka shabda. Right. So dik shabda, when we call it, apara, many times when we say purvapara, etc., it is used for to mean eastern and western as a qualifier, like say a western state, etc. But to indicate the direction east and west, there is a subtle difference. Dik and desha. When I say desha, it means an eastern land or a western land, whereas the absolute directions east, west, north, south. So apara is not used to mean west, as far as I know. It can mean western in specific context, but the digvachaka shabdas are purva, dakshina, paschima, uttara, and the dik samasa is seen only with those words, not with other words. Do we have only gopa at this level? Yes. I mean, for non-abanta strilinga, Laghu Kaumudi has only gopa. You can have other very similar words, like say Vishwapa itself can be used in strilinga, right? Say Vishwapaha Bhagavati. So she is the protector of the world, ityarthe. But that's all. Not many are there. Even in Pullinga, those are very rare. Okay. There's a question: what prevents Bahuvachane Jhalyet from applying in Sarva Syam situation? Right? Once you have the Syadagama, it is Jhaladi. So why does Bahuvachane Jhalyet not apply? Anybody wants to answer that?
Sarvasyam is ekavachanam.
Sarvasyam.
Only Bahuvachana.
Correct. So it is Ekavachana, right? So Syam is Ekavachana. So you cannot apply it. In Sarvasam, there is a Dirgha. There is no Adanta. Right? So that is why it cannot operate in Am. Sam, Jhaladi Pratyaya, Bahuvachana Pratyaya, but Anga is not Adanta. In Sarvasyam, Anga is Adanta, Pratyaya is Jhaladi, but it is not Bahuvachana. So Upama Shabdasya Rupani, Ramavat athava Vishwapavat, it is Ramavadeva. Upama iti tap pratyayantaha shabda. Upamayaha, upamayam ityadi abantaha shabda. Apart from the category for stri pratyaya, others are nitya strilinga. I didn't understand the question itself. See, the question of nitya strilinga, all stri pratyayantas are definitely nitya strilingas, because you are adding a stri pratyaya. You cannot use them in any linga other than strilinga, right? So any word with a stri pratyaya at the end, right, is a nitya strilinga shabda, because the pratyaya is added. Once the stri pratyaya is added, you cannot use it in any linga other than the strilinga. Right? Unless, of course, you do a samasa and all that, that's a different thing. The word itself will be nitya strilinga. When you do bahuvrihi, etc., it will always change. So you should remember. The word mula shabda itself will be nitya strilinga. Similarly, the second category, the pratyaya, the krit pratyaya itself is being added in striyam, right? So those are also nitya strilingas. So mati, gati, bhakti, they are all nitya strilingas. There is no doubt. When we come to the third category, it depends. Some are nitya strilingas, some are not. Like say, for example, the Sankhya Vachakas, say tri shabda is not nitya strilinga. It is there in all three, right? So words derived from dhatus, some of them are nitya strilingas. Like say, for example, bhuhu, bhavati iti bhuhu. Anything can exist, but because of prayoga, bhu shabda is nitya strilinga shabda, right? Whereas if you take something like swayam bhuhu, swayam bhavati, that shabda is not a nitya strilinga because it is used both in pullinga and strilinga. Right? You will not know unless we know the prayoga. Right? We can argue saying bhavati can be anything. It need not be just this, but prayoga is only in strilinga. Similarly, the unadi pratyayantas, it depends. Some of them are only in strilinga. Some of them are used both in pullinga, strilinga. So linga vyavastha in Sanskrita is not, it is dependent on prayoga. Right? So we will have to know it. For example, marichihi, it is there in pullinga, strilinga. So anima, garima, mahima, are they abantas? They are not. Actually, they are all nakaranta shabdas. Okay, anima, mahima, garima, laghima, etc. Right? So animan, gariman, mahiman, etc. If they are used as strilinga, they will be abantas. Generally, those such words are all nakarantas. So mahiman, mahima, mahimanau, mahimanaha, garima, garimanau, garimanaha. But as siddhis, if they are used in strilinga, they are abantas. Sharada is also an abanta shabda. It has no relation to da dhatu. It is sharat, sharadi bhava, sharada. Right? So from there it is an abanta, charada. So Ganga iti shabdaha api abantaha va satyam. See, you don't even have to think with regard to abantas. Okay. So you will hardly ever find any akaranta shabda which is not abanta. Any random shabda you take, it will be abanta. Right? So very, very few, like Gopa, Vishwapa, you can even count them 1, 2. That's all. Actually, only Gopa is used popularly in strilinga. Vishwapa you can take. Other than that, any akaranta strilinga shabda you find will be abanta. But remember, nakaranta shabdas, sometimes, they in ekavachana, prathama ekavachana, they will be like akarantas, right? Nakaranta, if you have, like, say, Rajan is Raja. Raja is a very famous word, so nobody will ask whether it is strilinga. But if you have other such words, right? So there, do not get confused. It's a nakaranta shabda. Like I said, mahima, it's a very popular example. Many people treat it as akaranta, strilinga, but it is actually nakaranta pullinga, mahiman shabdaha. So the forms will be mahima, mahimanau, mahimanaha. They are not abantas. It is not an akaranta shabda at all. We don't say uttama is nitya strilinga, right? Uttama with akaranta is a nitya strilinga shabda. Right? The word uttama, originally it is a visheshanigna, so you can have uttamaha, uttama, and uttamam. But that is the similar to all, ikaranta shabdas. Like, say, when you say Gauri, you have Gauraha in pullinga. Once you add the stri pratyaya, that word Gauri is used only in strilinga. Right? So it is a nitya strilinga shabda. Uttama is also a nitya strilinga shabda. When after adding the stri pratyaya, that word you cannot use it in any other linga. Whereas, as I said, say Vishwapa itself is not nitya strilinga, because the same form of the word Vishwapa itself can be used both in pullinga and strilinga. So other words, if we have like go, it is not nitya strilinga because it is used both in pullinga and strilinga in the same form. Is ktin different from ti? Yes, it is. The ti, which is a stri pratyaya, it is used only in one word, which is yuvatihi. Whereas ktin is derived from dhatus. So for many dhatus, we have the ktin pratyaya. After applying eram nadyam nibhyaha to ni, we get am in place of ni. So by sthanivadara adeshonal vidho, there is nitva in am, and then we can do the yadagama. Is that correct? Yes, correct. So ngeram iti amadeshe krute sthanivad bhavena am api nit bhavati. अतः तस्य याडागमः भवत्येव। गोपा वर्सेस गोपी विवृणोतु। Gopa is Gaha Pati, she who protects the cows. Okay. And it is actually by convention, it is not a person, it is a medicinal herb, okay, which is popularly called as Gopa. It could be used for somebody who actually takes care of the cows. Whereas Gopasya Stri Gopi. Gopi is a cowherd woman, that is the wife of a Gopa is called Gopi. I'll take only a couple more questions because all these are getting into the domain of Stri Pratyayas, which we cannot get into right now, right? Because we have the constraint. Sundara and Sundari. There is no Sundara. Sundari is a Nyanta Shabda. Okay. Isn't Ganga Unadi? It is Unadi plus Abanta. See, even in Unadi, just like in Kridanta, if you have an Adanta Shabda, Adanta, the Pratyaya ends in Hrasva Akara, then automatically Tap attaches. Similarly, Unadis, if the Pratyaya is Hrasva Akaranta, then immediately Tap will attach and we get an Akaranta Shabda. So Ganga has Unadi plus the Tap. Okay, so I think with these we will go ahead. Vibhasha diksamase bahuvrihau. Ye vaktumichanti hastamunnayantu. Kumar Shankar Mahoday.
Namaste Bhagini. Vibhasha diksamase bahuvrihau. Idam sarvanama sanya vidayakam sutram. Anuvrittihi sarvadini sarvanamani. Anuvritti sahita artha diksamase bahuvrihau sarvadini vibhasha sarvanamani. दिशावाचक शब्दयोः मध्ये जायमानेन बहुव्रीहि समासेन दक्षिणपूर्व उत्तरपूर्व दक्षिणपश्चिम तथा उत्तरपश्चिम एते चत्वारः शब्दाः सिद्ध्यन्ति। दक्षिणपूर्व तथा उत्तरपूर्व एतयोः द्वयोः शब्दयोः विद्यमानाः दक्षिण पूर्व तथा उत्तर इति त्रयः शब्दाः पूर्वपरावर इत्येतेन सूत्रेण सर्वनामसंज्ञायां पाठिताः सन्ति। परन्तु या सर्वनामसंज्ञा एवं प्राप्ता सा न बहुव्रीहौ इत्येतेन सूत्रेण दिक्समासानां शब्दानां सन्दर्भे निषिध्यते। एतं निषेधं प्रकृतसूत्रं निवर्तयते विकल्पेन। अतः प्रकृतसूत्रेण निर्दिष्टा विभाषा प्रकृतसूत्रस्य प्रयोगात् पूर्वम् अप्राप्ता इत्यतः अप्राप्ता विभाषा इति कथ्यते। एतानि अव्यय सर्वनाम्नः अकच् प्राप्तेः सर्वनाम्नः स्याड् आमि सर्वनाम्नः सुट् इत्येतैः त्रिभिः सूत्रैः क्रमशः अकच् प्रत्ययस्य स्याडागमस्य तथा सुडागमस्य विधानानि भवन्ति। एतानि त्रीणि प्रकृतसूत्रस्य दिक्समासानां सन्दर्भे प्रयोजनानि। That's all.
सुबन्तरूपाणि कुत्र रूपे कथं भवति सम्यक् प्रतिपादितं। तत्र उत्तरपूर्वस्यै उत्तरपूर्वायै तत्र सर्वनामसंज्ञा विभाषायाः फलं सुडागमः भवति चेत् क्षम्यतां स्याडागमः भवति चेत् तत्र उत्तरपूर्वस्यै इति रूपं भवति। यदा सर्वनामसंज्ञा नास्ति तदा याडागमः भवति उत्तरपूर्वायै इति। एवमेव सुडागमे सर्वनाम्नः सुट् भवति चेत् उत्तरपूर्वासां नो चेत् उत्तरपूर्वाणाम् इति रूपं सिद्ध्यति। अस्तु, अग्रे सर्वनाम्नः स्याट् ह्रस्वश्च इति सूत्रार्थः। Praveena.
नमस्ते भगिनी सर्वनाम्नः स्यात् ह्रस्वश्च अस्मिन् सूत्रे चत्वारः शब्दाः सन्ति सर्वनाम्न स्यात् ह्रस्वः च पंचमी एकवचन सर्वनाम्नः स्यात् प्रथमा एकवचन ह्रस्वः अपि प्रथमा एकवचन च अव्यये अस्ति अनुवृत्ति अस्ति आपः एवं च गीति एतत् विधिसूत्रम् अस्ति अङ्गस्य अधिकारे सूत्रार्थ अस्ति अबन्तात् सर्वनाम्नो गीतः स्यात् स्यात् आपश्च ह्रस्वः अनेन कार्यद्वयं विधीयते प्रत्ययस्य स्यात् आगमः एवं अङ्गस्य ह्रस्व भवति उदाहरणं सर्वस्यै सर्वायै सर्वस्याः सर्वायाः सर्वस्यां सर्वायां षष्ठी बहुवचने सर्वासां सर्वाणां विश्व अपि
सर्वस्याः पुनः वदतु उदाहरणानि
सर्वस्यै सर्वायै
सर्वायै इति न भवति किल नित्यं सूत्रमिदं स्याडागमः एव भवति
विकल्प नास्ति
विकल्पः नास्ति
अस्तु भगिनि
तत्र उत्तरपूर्वस्य इत्यत्र तस्य सर्वनामसंज्ञा विकल्प्यते इत्यतः तत्र रूपद्वयं किन्तु केवल सर्वाशब्दः विश्वाशब्दः चेत् तत्र एकमेव रूपम्
in that impression I did it okay sorry okay vakyam vadami सर्वासां जन्तानां ये सज्जनाः सन्ति तेषां मनसि एकम् एव चिन्तनं पृथिव्याः वातावरणं रक्षणीयम् इति
पुनः वदतु सर्वासां
जन्तानां ये
जनतानां सम्यक्
तावदेव
सम्यक् तत्र तदेव इदं वैकल्पिकं सूत्रं नास्ति नित्यसूत्रं भवति अतः नित्यमेव स्याडागमः अङ्गस्य ह्रस्वः उभयं विधीयते अनेन अस्तु प्रश्नद्वयमेव आसीत् विभाषा दिक्समासे इस् इट् प्राप्त विभाषा इति प्रश्नः वस्तुतः लघुकौमुद्यां विचारः न स्वीकृतः यतोहि अग्रे अन्यदेकं सूत्रमस्ति न बहुव्रीहौ सामान्यतः बहुव्रीहि समासे सर्वादीनां सर्वनामसंज्ञा न भवति इति निषेधं कृत्वा ततः अनेन विकल्पेन दीयते अतः इयम् अप्राप्तविभाषा संज्ञोपसर्जनीभूतास्तु न सर्वादयः उपसर्जनत्वं यत्र अस्ति बहुव्रीहि समासे सामान्यतः सर्वनामसंज्ञा न भवति अतः अप्राप्तविभाषा एव टेक्निकली सो फर्स्ट वी हैव सर्वादीनि सर्वनामानि which is prevented by na bahuvrihau and then again in diksamasa bahuvrihau it is optional. Okay. So if uttama is a nitya strilinga shabda, will it still qualify as visheshya nighna? See, when we are seeing the visheshya nighna is at the stage of uttama. Uttama shabdaha, sundara shabdaha, right? So when you have sundara, sundara is a visheshya nighna. It can be used in pullinga, strilinga, napumsakalinga. Similarly, uttama is a visheshya nighna because it describes a quality. It is an adjective, so it is visheshya nighna, right? So once you have the visheshya as a balika, then seeing that you want to bring out that stritva, we are adding the stri pratyaya to uttama shabda to make it uttama. So uttama is a visheshya nighna. It can be used in all three lingas, but once the stritva is decided and you have added the stri pratyaya, you can no longer use it in the other lingas. That is all is meant by nitya strilinga. Similarly, sundari, right? So sundari, once you have added the nyanta to make it sundari, it is no longer visheshanigna. You cannot make sundari as a visheshana to ramaha. You cannot make sundari as a visheshana to phalam. You have to take it as strilinga because you have already decided that it is a strilinga. Sundara is visheshanigna at the original stage, but once you add the stri pratyaya, it automatically it goes into strilinga because you have already decided that it is a strilinga shabda. Is a pada ending in a sarvanama also a sarvanama? Yes, if the sarvanama is pradhana, not upasarjana. So in samasas we have pradhana and we have gauna. So if the sarvanama is pradhana, it will still have sarvanama samya. If it is upasarjana or apradhana, it will not have sarvanama samya. Upasarjana means not important. Yes, not important in the sense of the shabda, not in general importance. As I said, in Rajyaha Putraha, Putra is Pradhana, Raja is Apradhana. It does not mean a king is not important. So it is not importance in the Laukika sense. In the Shabda, why is it not important? Because it is not directly related to the Kriya. If I say Raja Putraha Gacchati, Putraha Gacchati Natu Raja. Ataha Raja Apradhanam Putraha Pradhana. Okay, the last question I want to take for. Okay, there are two questions. One is out of scope, where Sarvanama is Pradhana and Upasarjana. Let's not get into it because it's a very long discussion on what is this one. Generally, if you take at the end of a Tatpurusha Samasa, so Paramaha Sarvaha, Paramasarvaha is Pradhana, Sarva is Pradhana. Okay, so Shreshtaha Sarvaha or anything you have this one, a Visheshana. So Tatpurusha Samasa, if you use at the end of a Tatpurusha Samasa, it will be Pradhana. Whereas if you use it in Bahuvrihi, Priyaha or Priyaha Sarve Yasya Saha, Priya Sarvaha, then it is Upasarjana. Okay. If we use Uttara Shabda to indicate north direction, it cannot be Sarvanama Samya, right? Why not? In Pullinga, we learn directions don't take Sarvanama Samya. No, it's the opposite. Directions do take Sarvanama Samya because it is still Vyavastha. So we decide what is east, west based on the position of the sun, the earth, etc. But they are also, it is a kind of a Vyavastha, right? So directions are also Sarvanama. They have like Purva, Uttara, etc. have Sarvanama Samya. So as directions, they are used only in Strilinga. If they are using it as a eastern, western, etc., then they become Visheshanas. Okay. So I can say Purvaha Gramaha, Purva Nagari, etc. But Purva by itself, if it means a direction, it is only in Strilinga. Okay. So we will go. Finally, I think today I can get to the discussion on Pati Shabda. But before that, a very quick game. Okay. Identify what is this sutra. Right. So it is just the number of boxes indicates the number of letters in the sutra. So there will be clues, 3 clues, and with each clue we will add, I'll show 1 letter or 2 letters more. So at the end of it, can you guess which is this sutra? Right. So this is the first one. I will say lower all hands. Can anybody guess this right at the beginning? Just raise your hand. Okay, too many people. Okay. Bhavani, Bhavani.
नलोपात् प्रातिपदिकस्य
Nalopaha.
प्रातिपदिकस्य
Does that fit? Is that the correct sutra?
लोपः प्रातिपदिकस्य कस्याः कस्य
One letter.
yeah
Sutra is correct, but
लोपः प्रातिपदिकस्य
what is the exact sutra? Okay.
प्रातिपदिकान्तस्य
सम्यक्. So nalopaha pratipadikantasya.
Yeah.
So pratipadika samyakam yat padam. So these were the clues. Whereas tripadistham sutram padasamya pratipadika samya cha apekshyate. Then nalopavidhayakam sutram. Okay, I think it was very easy. Okay, the next one. Please raise your hands if you want to try. You don't have to guess without it. I mean, you can take the clues and guess. That's okay.
One clue, please give.
Yes, yes. Just a moment. I'll select somebody and then I'll. Okay. Yes, Arnab Mahoday.
Ta nasi nasam inatsya.
Very good. Super. Ta ngasi ngasam inatsyaha. Okay. So Angadhikarastham sutram trayaha pratyayadeshaha anena vidhiyante. So ina, at and sya, and then ramasya. It is rupa siddhau upayogi. Too easy. But again, okay. This one. Leena Doshi.
प्रथमचरम कतिपय प्रथमचरम क्षम्यतां प्रथमचरम कतिपय नेमाश्च which I am missing a word. प्रथमचरम.
Okay. So the sutra is correct. Let's see if we can get it. Jasi sarvanama sanya vikalpena vidhiyate.
तयाल्प प्रथमचरम तयाल्प कतिपय नेमाश्च.
Tadalpa. There is one word blank.
प्रथमचरम तयाल्प कतिपय नेमाश्च. तयाल्प. Missing it, Bhagini.
Tayalpardha. Ardha. Is also there. No problem. Samyak. But that was amazing. I had actually forgotten what was the sutra I gave. I couldn't guess looking at the letters. Prathama charama tayalpardha katipaya nemascha. Okay. So good. So now we know that sutras, the minor letters which we tend to miss, we can pay attention. Samyak. I'll think of something more difficult for next time. Anyway, we are finally have time for a Jnanavardhini, which has been very long pending. Okay. Patye tatha pataye iti. So Sitayah pataye namaha iti shlokaha prayah sarvaihi shruta eva. Katham iti tatra vyakarana drishtya kleshah asti. Kila kimartham pati shabdam sarve smareyuh iti ashase. Pati samasa eva ityanena samase eva ghisamnya bhavati pati shabdasya. Bhupati, Sitapati, Ramapati ityadi. Ghisamyatra kimartham apekshyate. Pati e iti sthite ghisamya asti chet gherngiti ityanena gunaha pate e tataha ayadeshaha pataye. Ghisamya nasti chet kevalasya pati shabdasya kim bhavati pati e patye iko enachi iti anadeshe patye iti rupam bhavati. Tarhi ghisamya tannimittaha gunaha katham iti prashna. Right? So it is actually a kind of challenge for Vaiyakaranas. Right? Tatra itopi ekam jnatavyam षष्ठी युक्तश् छन्दसि वा इति अग्रिममेव सूत्रमस्ति अष्टाध्याय्याम्. छन्दसि इत्युक्ते वेदेषु षष्ठीयुक्तस्य पतिशब्दस्य अर्थात् पतिशब्देन सह षष्ठ्यन्तशब्दस्य अन्वयः अस्ति चेत् यथा सीतायाः पतिः रमायाः पतिः इत्यादि अस्ति चेत् षष्ठीयुक्तस्य असमस्तस्यापि पतिशब्दस्य समासे भवति छन्दसि पतिशब्दः केवलः इत्युक्ते समासः नास्ति चेत् तदापि विकल्पेन घिसंज्ञा भवति तेन सह षष्ठ्यन्त अन्वयः अस्ति चेत् उदाहरणं तत्र रुद्र रुद्रन् इत्यत्र अस्ति कुलुञ्चानां पतये नमः तत्र पुनः पतये इत्यस्ति क्षेत्रस्य पतिना वयं तत्र पतिना इत्यत्र आङ्गोनास्त्रियाम् इत्यनेन नाभावः कृतः तदपि घिसंज्ञाम् आश्रित्य भवति तत्र एवं मन्त्रेषु यत्र यत्र दृश्यते कुलुञ्चानाम् इति षष्ठीयुक्तः पतिशब्दः समासः नास्ति चेदपि घिसंज्ञां प्राप्नोति वेदेषु इति पाणिनिना सूत्रं कृतमस्ति अतः वैदिकप्रयोगाः तादृशाः बहवः दृश्यन्ते तेषां साधुत्वं वक्तुं वयं शक्नुमः किन्तु न केवलं वेदेषु पुराणेषु अपि षष्ठीयुक्तस्य पतिशब्दस्य बहुधा प्रयोगः एवं दृश्यते अयं नियमः तु वेदेषु एव किन्तु ऋषिवचनानि तत्र लिङ्गपुराणे रुद्राणां पतये नमः वसूनां पतये तथा इति महाभारते व्रतानां पतये मन्त्राणां पतये इति वायुपुराणे ज्योतिर्गणानां पतये दिनाधिपतये नमः इति रामायणे आदित्यहृदयम् इति प्रसिद्धः यः भागः तत्रापि दृश्यते जगतः पतेः इति विष्णुपुराणे पतेः इत्यस्ति अत्र तत्रापि घेर्ङिति इति गुणः कृतः अस्ति सामान्यस्य पतिशब्दस्य तु पत्युः इति भवेत् अत्र तु जगतः पतेः इति विष्णुपुराणे अस्ति गवां पतेः इति रामायणे अस्ति एवञ्च बहुधा एतादृशाः प्रयोगाः छन्दो भिन्ने अर्थात् अवैदिक प्रयोगेषु अवैदिकं नाम पुराणादि पौरुष साहित्ये अपि बहुधा दृश्यते पतिशब्दस्य ईदृशः प्रयोगः सीतायाः पतये नमः इति वाक्यं तु बहुत्र अस्ति प्रसिद्धः श्लोकः रामरक्षास्तोत्रे अस्ति किन्तु मूलं तु पद्मपुराणे एव दृश्यते रामाय रामभद्राय रामचन्द्राय वेधसे रघुनाथाय नाथाय सीतायाः पतये नमः शिवपुराणे अस्ति रामाय लोकरामाय मर्यादापुरुषायते रावणान्तकरायाशु सीतायाः पतये नमः स्कन्दपुराणे अस्ति सहस्राक्षाय शुद्धाय राघवाय च विष्णवे भक्तार्तिहारिणे तुभ्यं सीतायाः पतये नमः तर्हि कथम् एतादृशानां शब्दानां साधुत्वं वक्तव्यम् इति प्रश्नः तत्र प्रथमं समाधानं भवति आर्षप्रयोगः इति आर्षप्रयोगः इति इट्स् अ वेरी वेरी इम्पोर्टेंट कान्सेप्ट ट्रेडिशनल कान्सेप्ट इन संस्कृत तत्र बालमनोरमा इति व्याख्यानमस्ति सिद्धान्तकौमुद्याः तत्र बालमनोरमाकारः वदति सीतायाः पतये नमः इत्यादि तु आर्षम् इति आर्षं नाम किम् इति चेत् तत्र वाचस्पत्ये वयं पश्यामः चेत् व्याकरणोक्त अनुशासनम् उल्लङ्घ्य ऋषिणा प्रयुक्ते असाधुनि अपि साधुत्वेन अभिमते आर्ष शब्दः So what does it mean when we say Arsha Prayoga? So this is the definition which Vachaspatya gives. What is it? Vyakaranokta Anushasanam Ullanghya. So that is, it trespasses some rule which is defined in grammar. When I say grammar, it means Paniniya Vyakarana. So it means it is not fitting into some rule of Vyakarana, but Rishina Prayukte, it has been used by a Rishi. right? So Rishi, we should understand, it's a very, very important term in our tradition, sampradaya. Okay, we don't call just anybody as a Rishi. So Rishi is a very, very respected, venerated term. It is not just a general when we say somebody, like say Mahodaya or Varya, not like that. Right? Rishi mantra drashta, he who has achieved such, what you call the high focus, concentration, and all the qualities, whatever Bhagavan says, say ragadvesha viyuktatvam, etc. So he who has all those qualities, he who is completely devoted to satya and dharma. Okay. So only such persons are called rishis. So we say all these rishi proktam, rishi vakyam. When we say, I have quoted this earlier also, where Bhavabhuti says, Rishinam punaradhyanam vacham arthonu dhavati. They are such people where they just say something, even if it was not true, the world will change itself to make sure that it is true. It just shows that they are so devoted to dharma and satya. So Rishina prayukte, some prayoga by a rishi, which means rishikritaha granthaha. We have Ramayana, Mahabharata, the 18 Puranas, and other such rishikrita granthas, in which there is some prayoga which does not fit into the rules of grammar, but asadhuni api sadhutvena abhimate. It may not fit into grammar, but grammar is not, our Vyakarana does not place itself as the leader. Vyakarana is always a follower. Prayoga sharanaha vayyakaranaha. We have to follow the prayoga, especially shishta prayoga. So sadhutvena abhimate. So such prayogas, when we see some arbitrary prayogas, we don't say they are dushta prayoga or wrong. Aham vadami tatra doshaha bhavanti. Bhavantaha vadanti tatra doshaha bhavanti. If we do, it is a mistake, yes, because we are alpagnyas. But when it is coming from as a rishi vakya, in parampara, we don't say it is wrong. Yes, I mean, if you are a completely modern outlook, you say, okay, he has used it wrongly. That is fine, but we don't call it wrong. We say it is a rishikrita prayoga, so it is sadhutvena abhimata. Such a prayoga is called arsha. Rishibhihi prayuktatvat, rishinam cha pramana bhutatvat. Because it has been used by a rishi and because rishis are pramana, rishikrite granthe ayam prayogaha sadhuhu. That prayoga is accepted, validated in the context of that grantha only. Right? What do we mean sadhuhu? Tesham tathaiva patane apashabda prayoga kritaha adharmaha na. Right? Adharmaha na bhavati. Asmakam etadasti sadhu shabda prayoge dharmaha apashabda prayoge adharmaha. Tarhi gitayam kutrachid arsha prayogaha asti. Maya parivartaniyam va iti chet na parivartaniyam. Gita pathane gitayam yatha asti tathaiva patane naiva dharmaha. Yatohita rishi vachanam. Kintu asmabhihi yada prayogaha swatantriyena kriyate. Tadatu etadrishaha prayogaha doshaha eva. Right? So that is the accepted validity of an arsha prayoga. So one of the ways of justifying such a prayoga, sitaya, pataya, or all those, is by saying they are arsha prayogas. So when we are using those shlokas and mantras, it is fine. But as a general rule, when we are using, you have to know what is the correct form. Because, I mean, when I show this, it may appear that there are so many. But the actual prayogas of Pati Shabda without Ghisamya are much, much, much more. Okay, I've only called out the exceptions, but don't be under the impression that these prayogas are more. In the bhasha, in all the kavyas, all other, even in Ramayana, Mahabharata, usage of pati shabda without ghi samya is much more common and much more popular in the language. It is only some rare cases where we find such prayogas which go against pati samasa eva, in which case we can, the first thing we can say is arsha prayoga. Okay. There is also arsha prayoga, we generally say agatika gatihi. Agatika gatihi ityukte yatra anya kapi gatihi nasti, where there is no other resort, we cannot think of anything else, then we say okay, arsha prayoga. But Vaiyakaranas don't resort to arsha prayoga unless they don't have a they don't have any means at all. So many cases there are many Vaiyakaranas who try to see if working within the framework they can give some explanation, right? So actually Mahamahopadhyaya Charudeva Shastri, he has written a book called Durghata Vritti. Durghatanam Vrittihi. Durghata means those words which are very difficult to derive or justify grammatically. He has written an entire text picking such usages from literature which are difficult to defend according to grammar, but still he shows how they can be defended. Right? So such attempts have been made through generations of Vaiyakaranas. Right? So the only purpose of introducing it, please understand, it may appear like an intellectual circus sometimes. It is because the prayoga is not ordinary, you have to resort to something which is not ordinary. Right? So the takeaway from it is how to think, or what are appreciating the ways in which the grammarians have thought. Right? Whether or not, whatever arguments we do, the Rishi Prayoga is there and its sadhutva is also there. Is there a way we can justify this other than saying Arsha Prayoga? Right? So there is an interesting derivation given for pati. Okay? So patihi iti akhyataha patihi ityuchyate. Tatra pati shabdaha asti, the original pati shabda. So to that we add a pratyaya called nich by a vartika called tat karoti tadachaste. He who is known, famed as pati. Right? I mean, all of them may be patis, right? So like there are like crores of husbands in the world, but there are some where you are specifically say identifying Rama as Sitayaha patihi. He is identified or popularly known, associated with his wife and known as pati. So tasmin arthe nich pratyayaha pati shabdat kriyate. Tatra nich pratyaye tatra nakarasya chutu iti samya chakarasya halantyam tasya lopaha I iti avashishyate. This is a nama dhatu. Right? Like we saw in Sukhiyati, right? Sukham atmanaha ichhati. So we added a pratyaya called kyach. Right? So by adding kyach, we converted a sukha pratipadika namapada to a dhatu, which we call a nama dhatu. Similarly here, you can add pati is a namapada, we can add a pratyaya. This is not the niche that you popularly known as nijanta, right? Added to 10th gana dhatus in preranarthaka. That is different. There is another niche pratyaya among the nama dhatus, right? Which generates a dhatu, right? So in pati I, the ikara is deleted by another vartika. So now you have pati, which is a dhatu. It is a nama dhatu by sanadhyanta dhatavaha. A namapada has been converted to a dhatu. If it is a dhatu, you can add the unadi or the krit pratyayas. Right? So all unadi pratyayas and krit pratyayas are added to dhatus. So unadishu acha ihi iti sutramasti. Tatra I iti Anyaha unadi pratyayah yojyate. Right? So you get again pati e, and then the ikara is again dropped by a different sutra, neraniti, and you have pati. Right? So you have just done some manipulations where you started with pati and you end up with pati, but there is a subtle difference. Okay, so there is a original pati and an artificial one. Okay? So we have technical terms for it. It is called pratipadoktam and lakshanikam. Pratipadoktam ityukte moolatah tasmin rupe yadasti tat pratipadoktam. Lakshanikam, lakshanaya nishpannam. Lakshana here it means a sutra. Lakshanena, lakshanam is sutram. So by doing some grammatical operations, what you derive is called lakshanika. Right? So there is the original and artificial. Now, when we are saying patihi samasa eva, patis samasa eva iti sutre pati shabdaha yaha nirdishtaha saha niyamaha pati shabdaha samase eva ghisamyakaha bhavati iti niyamaha pratipadoktasyaiva pati shabdasya bhavati natu lakshanikasya. We have a paribhasha which says lakshana pratipadoktayoho pratipadoktasyaiva grahanam. You have a original word and you go through some grammatical means to derive a word. Among these, a general rule will apply to the pratipadokta, not to the lakshanika. Okay. So, tena kim bhavati ayam ghisamya niyamaha pratipadoktasya patishabdasya bhavati natu lakshanikasya. Ataha kim bhavati lakshanikaha, which is this artificial pati shabda which we derive, hari shabdavad bhavati. It is a normal ikaranta samanya shabda which behaves like hari. Very similarly, you can derive an artificial sakhi shabda. Sakhi iti akhya, sakha ityakhyatah. He who is known for his friendship ityarthe. You can go through the same set of processes and you can derive a lakshanika sakhi shabda. Both these lakshanika pati and sakhi behave like hari shabda. Atayeva Mahabharate Krishnasya sakhirarjunaha sakhihi iti prayogaha asti. Sakha arjunaha ityapi asti. Sakhihi yatha harihi तथा सखिः इति प्रयोगः अस्ति. सखिना वानरेन्द्रेण इति रामायणे अस्ति. Sakhi a, normal would be sakhya, but we have such prayogas of these two shabdas. Pati and sakhi are vishesha shabdas. Tesham rupani hari shabdat prayena bhinnani bhavanti. Kintu rishi kriteshu grantheshu kadachit hari shabda sadrisham rupam drishyate. So to defend this, so Vaiyakaranas have come up with a path through which you can somehow justify. As I said, in both cases there is no difference. Right? It is only prayoga sharanaha Vaiyakaranaha. We have a rishi prayoga, we are just trying to derive it. But in the process, right, we understand a lot of things about Vyakarana. Right? Getting these in the right spirit is very, very important. Right? It does not mean you just randomly do any prayoga and justify it by some means. Right? Saha tat lakshyam na atra. Kintu Vyakarane katham bhavati. You can explore how Vyakarana works. There are so many things within Vyakarana which we can use. So it helps us to sharpen our arguing skills, our understanding of various concepts in Vyakarana. Tayaiva drishtya idam pratipaditam ubhayathapi tadrishaha pataye ityadi prayogaha atyantam viralaha. It is not accepted in general. Kintu rishikriteshu grantheshu yada etadrishaha prayogaha drishyante Samadhanam katham kartum shakyate. I think this was explained somewhere in Shuddhi Kaumudi, or not, maybe Bhashapaka. Somewhere this explanation is there, given by Janardana Hegade Mahoday. So it is just an attempt to help you appreciate such arguments in Vyakarana. Tatra vayam sthagayamaha. We will stop here and we will meet in the next week. येनाक्षरसमाम्नायम् अधिगम्य महेश्वरात् कृत्स्नं व्याकरणं प्रोक्तं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः. वाक्यकारं वररुचिं भाष्यकारं पतञ्जलिं पाणिनिं सूत्रकारं च प्रणतोऽस्मि मुनित्रयं. नत्वा सरस्वतीं देवीं शुद्धां गुण्यां करोम्यहं. पाणिनीयप्रवेशाय लघुसिद्धान्तकौमुदीम्.